After doing a lot of research on this topic, I found out that the erroneous choices people make during their lifetime make them poor. In some way, it connects to the road of successes in which you finish school, get a job, and start a family. People who did this mostly weren't poor. One more thing was the environment in which people live also altered their choices. Things like racism, gender discrimination, economic and other factors made people go with different choices. There's no doubt that life doesn't present equal opportunities for everyone, but in the end, it's how people deal with those circumstances that shape their lives. So let's hop into the specifics of why poor people stay poor. Number 1. Government policies. Governments have a lot of policies and strategies that keep people poor, and which should be questioned. They have programs to help the poor, and all they do is argue over the programs that should be funded and programs that shouldn't be funded. Instead of doing that, they should bring out reforms on arrears that are inflicting pain on poor people. For example, the US has a social welfare program that helps the poor fulfill their basic needs like food and healthcare, but a lot of governments in the world don't give this facility to their poor population. Because governments don't have proper policies that don't provide basic necessities for their poor, the poor keep falling into poverty. Number 2. Education. Almost all of the studies done on the topic have found out that education directly affects the financial success of a person. A lot of poor families can't afford to send their children to school and make them work at a young age. Also, some poor families don't educate their daughters. What they don't know is that education provides everyone with more opportunities, skills, and resources. According to UNESCO, if only people get basic reading skills from school, about 172 million people would omit poverty. The quality of education falls way behind compared to the education in private schools, and knowing that education will decrease poverty by half, governments are not doing anything about increasing the standard of education in government schools. In some parts of the US, it is illegal to send your child to a school outside of your assigned district, and other things like this should be resolved with anti-poverty programs, and parents should be given full control to decide the future for their children. Number 3. Housing. The government policies have already made life very expensive, but with things like taxes and trade barriers, things have become much more difficult for the poor. We should keep an eye on housing policies in urban sectors, as the poor are moving from rural to urban cities to find better opportunities to lead a better life. Houses policies like land use policies have made the cost of houses so high that the poor are unable to pay the rents, and this has caused the development of slums. For example, New York and San Francisco have one of the highest zoning costs, which are more than 50%. Because of all this, the poor are forced to live in slums away from the cities, and have bad schools and fewer job opportunities that keep them poor forever. Number 4. Savings. Everyone should save, as it helps people to spend less and prepare for the future in better ways, and more than anyone, poor should do this too, but they can't do so because banking laws have made it difficult for the poor to approach banking systems. The asset test for public programs also doesn't favor the poor when it comes to savings. Social securities reduce the opportunities for the poor to save themselves. Governments should bring up saving policies for the poor and provide them with better paying jobs, so they can save money, as most of them work on daily wages. It's impossible for them to save, which causes them to stay stuck in miserable conditions. Number 5. Economic growth. Policies like lowering taxes, encouraging savings, and entrepreneurship should be chased, as these policies can help in economic growth and create free markets. By removing barriers like occupational zoning, minimum wage, and occupational license rules, the poor can also help in economic growth. Many professions like makeup artists, florists, and funeral attendants require licenses, and by lowering barriers, these occupations can help poor people achieve employment and entrepreneurial opportunities. Poor people can benefit from these as they have fewer skills and need better prices. Low-skilled people can't land a better job because of minimum wages. Occupational zoning stops the poor from starting small businesses. Number 6. Criminal justice. Favoritism toward the rich and bias towards the poor has caused more poverty. The criminal justice system is also a part of this cycle. For example, a family with a father in jail will obviously increase the poverty rate. In America, almost 5 million children have their fathers in prisons, which has increased poverty. Being self-sufficient for a person also becomes impossible if they have a criminal record. Things like these can tear down a person emotionally who is already suffering from poverty. It can also disturb their families, their social lives, and their children. Slum areas in most countries are usually affiliated with crime, so the government doesn't even bother developing their infrastructure and spend their resources on improving their security. Number 7. Climate change. The World Bank has found out that in the next 10 years climate change has the potential to push 100 million people into poverty. Natural disasters like floods, droughts, and tornadoes completely destroy communities. This affects the poor way more because most of their earnings are dependent on farming. What the poor do is save some harvest for times when they cannot grow more crops, but when disasters like these strike, everything gets destroyed, and the poor become vulnerable to diseases and are left with no food and no shelter. Things like these push the poor more into poverty, and recuperation from this is very tough. In the end, all we can do is allow the poor to take control of their lives, which will give them a chance to rise from poverty. Working with foundations can help in decreasing poverty. Teaching them about climate change, government policies, and the importance of education will motivate them to depart from poverty. That's it for today. Hope you liked the video and learned something from it. If you did like the video, don't forget to subscribe if you are new to the channel.